Representative Thomas Massie, who's been the only Republican willing to speak out against Israel, who's been the only Republican who has consistently voted against sending more military aid to Israel, had a sit-down interview with Tucker Carlson. And it was kind of amazing.
I'm not against Israel. I've never voted to sanction Israel. I've never said anything particularly, critical of Israel, other than, for instance, right now they're bombing, they've killed 1% of the civilian population in Gaza. That's concerning to me. I vote my conscience, which they won't tolerate. So they ran with their 501c4 before they had a super PAC. They were running educational advocacy ads against me, saying that, I'm bad on Israel. This election cycle, they spent $400,000 against me, $90,000 last fall running TV ads in my district and Facebook ads and whatnot.
They've called you a bigot and they call you an anti-Semite and say you're a hater and try to destroy your character.
During a recent sit-down interview between Tucker Carlson and Kentucky's Libertarian Congressman Thomas Massie, we learned quite a bit about how AIPAC, the lobby that basically represents Israel, how much sway they have over Republican politicians in particular. Now, Thomas Massie experienced quite a bit firsthand, and I think the insight that he provided in the context of this interview was worthy of a listen, and honestly something that I give him props for, even as a member of the Republican Party who has a bunch of stances I totally disagree with. He's against reproductive rights for women. He's not the kind of politician that I would typically support. But he does appear to be incredibly principled when it comes to the issue of foreign aid to various countries, including Israel. And he consistently voted against offering Israel more military aid during this current war. And that led to a lot of attacks against him, but he persisted. And again, I give him credit for that. During this interview, he even went so far as to say that every Republican lawmaker has an AIPAC babysitter, which you definitely want to stick around for. We're going to get to that clip in just a moment. But first, let's actually start at the beginning with what Massie experienced as he was running for Congress. Massie says that his first run with AIPAC was in 2012 when they actually had this strange request for him.
They tried to get me to write a white paper as a candidate, for instance, for Congress. They almost get
on what?
On Israel, and I wouldn't do it. And they said, why? And I'm like, I don't do homework for lobbyists, right? I'm like, I didn't like writing term papers at college. I'm not writing one for you.
What did they say?
They said, oh, well, here, just copy Rand Paul's term paper and put your name on it. We'll accept that. And I'm like, no, I'm still not cribbing somebody else's homework to do homework. I'm not turning in my homework for you. And what? You're laughing, but you know what? I bet I may be the only Republican in Congress who hasn't done homework for AIPAC. And it's just what it is. It's conditioning. They want you to do something very simple and benign, and for them, they don't really grade your term paper. They just want to know that you'll do something for them. And if you'll do something for them as a candidate, you're more likely to do something for them as a congressman when you get in there.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
How insane is that? It's essentially testing to see if lawmakers are willing to take orders from this incredibly powerful lobby that represents the interests of a foreign government. And to his credit, he's like, nah, I'm not gonna do a little report for you. I'm not interested. And when AIPAC says, it's okay, you don't have to spend any time working on anything, just take someone else's report and pass it off as your own, he wasn't willing to do that either. And he recognized what that task was really meant for, what it was supposed to communicate to the lobby. And again, to his credit, he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And we're actually kind of lucky because AIPAC wasn't paying, according to him, wasn't paying very close attention to his race. They didn't think he was going to win a congressional seat. And so when they got involved in trying to destroy his campaign, it was already too late. He had garnered quite a bit of support from constituents in his district. Now, since Massie was unwilling to play ball with AIPAC, they did retaliate. So let's just hear some details about that.
How did they respond to that?
Well, they kind of got in my race a little too late there in the beginning, and because it was hard to tell that I was actually going to win. And when they saw I was going to win, that's when they tried to get me to do the term paper. They didn't have a political action committee at the time. They couldn't spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars against me at that time. It was just sort of like a whisper campaign to try to, hey, don't vote for him, blah, blah, blah.
That's why.
Because at that point they sensed I wouldn't do what they wanted when I got.
But what did they whisper against you? What were they saying about you?
Well, they would do it through, for instance, churches, evangelical churches. They've got an organization called Christians United for Israel, where they sort of co-opted evangelicals. People think it's a grassroots movement in Kentucky. It's actually a top-down movement from AIPAC, so that people who aren't even Jewish will feel like they've got to support Israel, no matter what.
I thought that comment was really important because it gives you an inside look into the tactics that AIPAC deploys. They're obviously well-funded, well-organized. They've got a ton of people, especially if they can have a babysitter available for every Republican lawmaker, which we'll get to in a moment. But it just kind of gives you that sneak peek, that inside look into the inner workings of these relationships that lobbyists forge with our elected lawmakers, and how, they'll use carrots. The carrots come in the form of cold hard cash for their campaigns, but they also use sticks, including showing up to evangelical churches to propagandize the parishioners there. That is insane. And I just want you all to understand how brave it is to not cave to that kind of pressure as a politician. I say that because almost every politician in our federal government does cave to that kind of pressure. Very few politicians resist. And that's why I want to give Massie credit here. Even though he is in disagreement with me on a whole host of political issues, you have to give credit where credit is due. And in this case, I give him credit for actually being principled on what his beliefs are and doing his best to stay true to those principles, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do as a United States politician. Now, finally, here's Massie talking about the AIPAC babysitters that each congressional Republican has.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them, and they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them. So I've had
that's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to, dial those ads back.
So the AIPAC babysitter can, jump in and help you out if you need help with your congressional campaign, whether it be with funding or with the types of ads that are airing. And in this case, Massie was offered help by other lawmakers who had AIPAC babysitters. This whole notion that they might be able to jump in and help, lessen the blow of some of the terrible ads that AIPAC was putting out against Thomas Massie. But how embarrassing is it to have an AIPAC babysitter? I mean, that's a great way of putting it. I'm glad that he used that terminology. These are elected lawmakers who are supposed to serve the best interests of the American people, of the constituents within their districts. And rather than doing that, they feel that they need to be loyal to these lobbyists. And I can understand why. I mean, a lot of these politicians are narcissistic cowards. they're not in their positions. They're not in elected office because they genuinely care about being public servants. They're there to enrich themselves. They're there to trade individual stocks based on insider info, something that Martha Stewart went to prison for, but our elected lawmakers won't go to prison for. They're there to spend money on luxury hotels in DC, even if they have homes in DC already, and then expense that to the American taxpayers without having to provide a damn receipt because they literally passed a law so they don't have to provide a receipt, and Americans end up paying for their luxury trips and their luxury goods. It's absolutely ludicrous. That's what the majority of lawmakers are in Congress for. That's why Congress has an insanely low approval rating, because Americans aren't stupid. I don't care what you identify as. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican. Everyone is so bitter and so angry with how little government works for us. And what Thomas Massie is disclosing to the public in this interview is the reason why. These are the forces behind closed doors that basically suck up all of the attention from our lawmakers as Americans are dying from neglect over all these various issues, whether it be the drug overdose epidemic, whether it be the housing crisis. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, whether it be the migrant crisis. We haven't had immigration reform in this country for decades, many decades. And so it's just incredible that he was willing to say this and to say it so openly, honestly, without any throat clearing, without any caveats. He's just calling it like it is. And powerful lobbies usually garner pretty incredible results. And I want to show you what those results look like. So let's put this chart up. This is a chart using data from the federal government showing which countries received the most in US foreign aid since World War II. So this is between 1946 and 2024. And by far, Israel is the largest recipient of US foreign aid to the tune of $337 billion. Coming in at second, you have Egypt at $198.9 billion. But again, clearly Israel's the top recipient here, and that's not by accident. So the final thing I'll say about this is, one thing that I think unites voters on both sides of the political aisle is the frustration that they feel about the swamp, about the corruption. And so to have these two right-wingers have this frank conversation about the influence of the Israel lobby, think about the audience they're speaking to. It is important for that audience to hear this. This is something that, the left, generally speaking, has been screaming from the rooftops about. But I'm so happy that these kinds of conversations are also being had on the right. I think that's valuable, and we should give credit where credit is due. Doesn't mean that we have to support Thomas Massie as a politician that would represent us in our districts, right? I mean, obviously he has views that I disagree with, but when he's right, he's right. And on this issue, not only is he right, he's also incredibly brave for doing what he's doing, knowing that he's going to face ad campaigns and attacks from AIPAC. I mean, he's certainly more brave than John Fetterman, a senator who ran as a progressive and can't stop himself from kissing Netanyahu's ass day in and day out. I mean, totally pathetic. And he puffs his chest up as if he's like some incredibly courageous lawmaker. You're not courageous. You don't have to worry about re-election for several years. Okay, so you're running your mouth. We'll see how it plays out when he's running for re-election.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.